This is Augie Macro with Cryptid Creatures. Pennsylvania is a very fascinating state with a vast wealth of historical sites, roadside oddities, and paranormal locations. Today, on this very special edition feature-length program, we will be taking a grand tour of the state, exploring the oddities, the history and the mysteries, the cryptids, the creatures, and the curiosities of the Keystone State. Before we begin, for those who do wish to take a road trip across the state, I recommend against following the order by which we're presenting this, as you would be doing lots of zigzagging and burning lots of gas. The order that we're presenting this in isn't really meant to have any particularly logical order, and we're just bouncing around the state however we please. Though this barely scratches the surface of all you can see in this great commonwealth, we do get to see weather forecasting rodents and ghostly apparitions and sea serpents and Bigfoot and all kinds of historical sites. And we get to talk to the foremost paranormal expert in the state, Stan Gordon, and countless other things. To begin, we will be exploring the geological history of the state and many of its prehistoric species. So, buckle up, fill up the tank, and get ready for this grand tour of the Keystone State. Here we are at the Red Hill Fossil Site on Route 120 outside of Hyner, Pennsylvania. The geologic history of Pennsylvania can be dated back over 1 billion years, back to an era known as the Proterozoic. At this time, all life on Earth was microscopic, and all the land masses on Earth were conjoined into one supercontinent known as Rodinia. The landmass that would eventually become North America was known as Laurentia. At around 750 million years ago, Rodinia began to split up, and the first macroscopic life began to appear in the fossil record. At around 600 million years ago, Pennsylvania would have been in a shallow sea dominated by strange primitive animals known as ediacarans. These would have included species such as Charnia, Dickinsonia, and Sprigina. Though some of the ediacarans would have evolved into families such as jellyfish and sponges, the majority of them would die out at the end of the Ediacaran period, around 550 million years ago. Between around 550 and 480 million years ago, we move into a period known as the Cambrian. At this time, all of the representative families of animal life on Earth would have evolved, including the first arthropods, mollusks, and vertebrates. Examples of this at the time would have included species such as Anomalocaris, Marella, Apabinia, and Picaya. Between 480 and 450 million years ago, we move into a time period known as the Ordovician. At this time, we would have seen the development of the first true coral reefs, as well as the first sea scorpions, orthocones, and fish. However, at the end of the Ordovician, due to a series of ice ages, many of these species would die out in the Ordovician extinction. Between 450 and 415 million years ago, we move into a period known as the Silurian. Coral reefs at this time would have been much more prevalent, and Pennsylvania would have been in a warm, shallow sea. At this time, the first terrestrial plants and animals would have begun to evolve as well. Between 415 and 360 million years ago, we now move into the period that is represented here at Red Hill, the Devonian. At this time period, jawed fish become more common in the environment, and species known as placoderms, these armored fish, including Bothrialepis and Dunkleosteus, become prevalent. At this particular location at the Red Hill fossil site, it's dated at about 360 million years ago, and at the time, Pennsylvania would have been a coastal swamp forest, dominated by jawed fish, placoderms, and the first amphibians. Species discovered here would have included Hyneria, a large lobe-finned fish that would have filled the role of large sharks, growing over 20 feet long, and Hynerpeton, a species of primitive salamander-like amphibian that would have grown around 2 feet long. They're named after the nearby town of Hyner. At the end of the Devonian, however, around 360 million years ago, many of these species would have died out during the Devonian mass extinction. Here we are at Ohiopyle Falls on the Fern Cliff Trail at Ohiopyle State Park in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. Fern Cliff Trail is particularly well known for the variety of fossils that exist in the rocks on the trail. These fossils represent a very important time period within Pennsylvania's geologic history. Between 360 and 295 million years ago, this time period was known as the Carboniferous. It is aptly named due to its most prominent feature. They were commonly referred to as coal forests or coal swamps, and they were massive tropical swamp forests that existed all along the coastal regions of planet Earth at the time, including Pennsylvania and the Appalachian Mountains. Pennsylvania, in human history, has been well known for its coal deposits, which have led to coal industries, natural gas industries, and even the steel industry. This is all made possible by these coal swamps, because at the time, these swamps did not fossilize the same way the rest of the fossils of the time did. The wood of these trees was compressed in the way that sedimentary rocks were, but they never completely decomposed, which left a black carbonaceous substance known as coal. These coal forests, however, began to disappear around 295 million years ago at the end of the Carboniferous, whenever a massive ice age set in all across the Earth. Biological representatives of this time include scale moss trees such as Lepidodendron, horsetail-like trees such as Calamites, and giant insects like Meganeura, a giant dragonfly. Others include giant millipedes such as Arthropleura, and even some of the earliest reptiles. Between 295 and 251 million years ago, however, we move into another time period known as the Permian. This time period was characterized by vast arid expanses within the interior of the continents. This is because, at the time, all the supercontinents on Earth were converging into one massive landmass called Pangaea. And because ocean moisture could not reach the interior of Pangaea, massive deserts formed. At this time, the first mammal-like reptiles would have begun to evolve as well. These would eventually become the ancestors of the first mammals during the Triassic period. Representatives of this group include Dimetrodon and Adaphosaurus in this particular area. However, 251 million years ago, at the end of the Permian, a mass extinction set in, caused by major volcanic activity in what is now Siberia. This caused countless impacts on the biosphere as a whole, including climate change, acidification of the oceans, and blocking out of the sun, which led photosynthesis to nearly stop. This was the largest mass extinction in the Earth's history, as far as we are aware, killing off 95% of all species on this planet, and nearly 97% of all aquatic life. Here we are at High Falls in Ringing Rocks Park in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The rocks that I currently stand on comprise of shale and basalt, which represent another layer of the geological history of Pennsylvania. These rocks formed between 250 and 200 million years ago, during a period known as the Triassic. At this time, Pennsylvania would have been full of a variety of different ecosystems, such as swampy forests, shallow seas, and even deserts. And many of the species that would have existed here at this time include some of the earliest dinosaurs, such as Coelophysis, Ankylosaurus, and Dilophosaurus, other large reptiles such as Redondosaurus and Desmatosuchus, the ancestors of the first crocodiles and flying reptiles, pterosaurs, as well as other large amphibians, fish, and even the ancestors of mammals. Around 200 million years ago, this particular location would have been comprised mostly of swampy forests, with lots of lake beds and riverbeds covered in silt. As we transition from the Triassic to the Jurassic, between 200 and 145 million years ago, and the Cretaceous, between 145 and 66 million years ago, the fossil record becomes even more vague, as the rocks necessary to fossilize skeletal remains are nearly non-existent in most of the eastern United States. However, as is true everywhere else in the world, fossil evidence of non-avian dinosaurs completely disappears around 66 million years ago, after the events of the Cretaceous mass extinction, where an asteroid hit the Earth off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, wiping out 75% of all life on Earth. Here we are at Meadowcroft Rockshelter and Historic Village outside the small town of Avella, Pennsylvania, where we will be discussing the last and most recent section of Pennsylvania's geologic history, known as the Cenozoic era. This expanse of time encompasses everything from just after the Cretaceous mass extinction all the way up to present day. Though fossils from the majority of this time are very rare, we can have a good understanding of what may have been here at this time. In nearby Maryland, we've discovered fossils of various terrestrial and aquatic animals, such as Amphision, a primitive bear-like creature, and the prehistoric shark Megalodon. The majority of the fossil record from this time period comes from what is known as the Pleistocene, or the Ice Age, which occurred from around 1 million to 11,700 BC. Many of these fossils include the famous mammoths, direwolves, cave bears, and Ice Age bison, as well as some of the earliest records of Paleo-Indians in North America. This is where Meadowcroft comes in. This site is particularly well known for its record of Paleo-Indians.
If you happen to look above the roof we're under before you guys came up the steps, you would have seen that large ledge of rocks that exists above this roof. So that ledge of rocks overhangs this roof. It's not supported at all by this roof. So that ledge of rocks is what creates the rock shelter. A rock shelter is obviously different than a cave, all right? No walls or no cave that you went back into. The rock shelter itself is made of sandstone, all right? Pennsylvanian age sandstone, so to geology folks, that makes it about 300 million years old. Deposited in a large river channel that would have flowed through here back then. Adjacent to that river channel would have been some of the swamps that formed the coal beds that we mine around here today. And if you look at the back wall, you see there's a difference in the texture roughly right about here. All right, that represents the original ground surface in 1973. So between 13,500 years ago and 1973, this infilled from this level down here all the way up to that level right there. And all the sediment that infilled it over those thousands of years was just natural erosion of that sandstone. It's not well cemented. It erodes in anything and everything from sand-sized grains all the way up to huge roof falls like that, and just about any size rock you can think of in between.
Though the rocks themselves are sandstone that were deposited here approximately 300 million years ago during the Carboniferous period, the formation itself was formed through erosion over the last 20,000 years by Cross Creek that runs just below us. The strata at this site represent a very comprehensive record of the life of the ecosystem and the humans that have existed here all the way back to about 17,000 BC, and as recent as the 1770s during the American Revolution.
1775. So that's the original ground surface right there. A tag right there that says AD 1265. And then down here, we have a tag that says 1305 BC.
The artifacts here that have made this site so famous are stone tools that date all the way back 17,000 years BC, which pushes the date of what we once thought humans arriving in North America was back a few thousand years. We originally suspected that humans had arrived in the Americas around 12,000 years ago, whenever the Ice Age was beginning to end, when glaciers were receding. However, being that there are stone tools here that are 17,000 BC, so 19,000 years old, that means that there must have been humans here much earlier. Other fascinating fossils and artifacts that have been found here are very detailed representations of the flora and fauna that existed here, with 149 specific animal species discovered here throughout the site. Though there were a variety of primitive stone tools that were discovered around 19,000 years ago, the one particular artifact that clenched the significance of this site was named the Miller Lancelet, which is displayed right here. The arrowhead was named this in honor of Albert Miller, the man who began the actual archaeological investigations at this site in 1973.
He came down to the rock shelter, found a groundhog hole, excavated down into the groundhog hole, and found some artifacts. So he kept the artifacts, covered up the groundhog hole, didn't tell any of the locals, and looked for an archaeologist to excavate it. Took him 18 years to convince one to come here. That was Professor Jim Addavasio, who in 1973 was with the University of Pittsburgh. So the dig here began in 1973. It was conducted by graduate students, summer field camps, the summers of 1973 to 1978. The most important discovery here was something they eventually named the Miller Lancelet, after Albert Miller, the owner. It was found right down here in the deep hole. Radiocarbon dating on associated with that point in the same level showed it to be about 12,000 radiocarbon years old, or 14,000 calendar years, which made it older than anything that had been found in the U.S. and stirred up a large controversy with the folks who thought the Clovis people, the folks who made the Clovis points, were the first guys over here, and nobody was here before that. But after this discovery, and subsequently here 50 years later, we have other sites in North America, South America that are 15 to 20,000 years old. The site's been corroborated and it's accepted. So all's good.
After the end of the last ice age, human settlements begin to move from hunter-gatherer to more sedentary lifestyles. In particular, around 2000 BC, we see an era known as the Agricultural Revolution, where agriculture and farming becomes the main source of sustenance for much of the world's civilizations. This settlement belonged to the Monongahela Indians, a tribe that existed in the Pittsburgh area between 1000 AD all the way up to the 17th century when they disappeared.
So this site is representative of 1570, which would be both the height and the peak of the Monongahela native culture in this area. They come into the archaeological record around 1000 AD. They dissipate into the record around 1630. Best we can tell is a mixture of famine, tribes moving this deep inland, and just other environmental factors. We have some amount of a proof that there was a major drought in the early 1600s that would have sped along their decline. Additionally, since they grew 80% of their food, any kind of a drought would have spiraled out into driving animals out of the region, which would have then threatened the rest of the hunting that they would have. This culture specifically focused mostly on smaller game. We're looking at like a white-tailed deer is the largest thing that they would have hunted for. Anything else would have been supplementary. A lot of raccoon, skunk, groundhog, just smaller trapping game. And since they were primarily relying on, stone, bone, weaponry, they needed a wide amount of success in order to facilitate a larger village's success. Because any of these villages could range from, 60 to 80 people, and their footprints would, of course, be larger than this one is. This would represent a village for about 40 to 50 people.
So this is an atlatl. It's a prehistoric spear thrower. Dates back to at least the Ice Age. The oldest known one that we have dates back about 20,000 years. Evidence of their use was found on every continent except, of course, for Antarctica. So each group that used them would have had a slightly different design and a different name. We use atlatl. It's the Aztec word. There are two translations that I've heard. One, simply spear thrower. The other is skims over the water.
In Huntingdon County, about an hour's drive east of Altoona, lies Raystown Lake, a 27-mile-long reservoir where you can boat, swim, or search for the lake's famous monster, Ray. Here we are on the shores of Raystown Lake in Huntingdon County, Pennsylvania, where for decades there have been reports of a strange creature in the lake. It is known as Raystown Ray. The first official sighting of the creature occurred near the old Raystown Dam in 1962. However, it was destroyed in 1972 to create Raystown Lake. Eyewitness reports describe a large plesiosaur-like animal with a long neck and a bulky, humped body, similar to that of reports of the Loch Ness Monster. Though many believe the creature is a vegetarian due to the amount of water plants in the lake, as well as the fact that no one has ever reported the creature eating any animals or people. Many have proposed various explanations as to what the creature may be. Some believe that it is just logs floating in the water or waves. Others believe that it may be an unusually large carp. And others still believe that it may be a plesiosaur that has survived extinction somehow. Are any of these claims true? We may never know. About an hour south of Harrisburg, in Lancaster County, lies the town of Columbia. And while you're there, you can visit the scenic Chickees Rock County Park. Here we are at Chickees Rock County Park along the Susquehanna River near the small town of Columbia, Pennsylvania, where for centuries there have been reports of a strange hair-covered hominid in these woods. It is referred to as the Albino Witch. The Albino Witch is described as being a small 4-foot-tall, gray or brown hair-covered humanoid creature similar to a Bigfoot. It is known for stealing apples, and it is thought that the name comes from a corruption of the term apple snitch. The story originates in Pennsylvania Dutch folklore, but still continues to this day. Will we ever be able to fully understand this strange hominid creature and its apple-stealing habits? We may never know. Up the Susquehanna from Columbia, in Dauphin County, lies the capital of the Keystone State, Harrisburg. This historic city has plenty of fascinating sights. In the state capitol building, you can explore the halls and meet your local legislators, see the fountain in the East Wing, stare up at the art in the dome of the rotunda, and stand where President Theodore Roosevelt stood in 1906 when he dedicated the building. And just across the street lies the Pennsylvania State Museum, which houses an incredible collection of artifacts, specimens, and documents from Pennsylvania's rich history.
One particularly scenic location, on Pennsylvania Route 872 in Cameron County, is Cinemahoning State Park, home to a handful of interesting sights. You can visit George B. Stevenson Dam, locally known as Stevenson's Dam, which was built in 1955 to control the flow of floodwater from First Fork Cinemahoning Creek into the West Branch Susquehanna River Basin. Or, if you need a place to stay the night, stop by at the Lake View store, about 2 miles north from the dam, where you can rent a cabin or sit on the veranda while you eat some Perry's ice cream, which is sold inside. Another fascinating stop in the park is the Arch Tree, which is about 6 or so miles north of the dam, near the Potter County border.
Here we are in Cinemahoning State Park in Cameron County, Pennsylvania, at the Arch Tree. And though it is not paranormal, it is still a local oddity. Many locals claim that the tree was intentionally bent many centuries ago by the local Indian tribes as a landmarker. However, through our research, we've discovered that the tree is far too young for this, and it is much more likely that it was intentionally bent by a local farmer or another tree landed on it when it was very young.
For those into the history of the American Revolution, Valley Forge National Historical Park in Montgomery County is the place for you, with plenty to see, such as Washington's headquarters, the National Memorial Arch, the Artillery Park, and the many other monuments that lie throughout the park.
Here we are at Valley Forge National Historical Park near King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, where in December of 1777, the Continental Army led by General George Washington made encampment here after their defeat at the Battle of Brandywine near Philadelphia. During their time here, they experienced many hardships, such as a lack of resources, various diseases such as influenza and dysentery and typhus, and the icy conditions of the Pennsylvania winter. Of the approximate 12,000 soldiers that made encampment here, nearly 2,000 of them died from disease and the conditions. In subsequent years, many have reported sightings of ghosts and other paranormal phenomena throughout the park, particularly in regions that were once grave sites and burial sites. Are any of these claims true? We may never know.
If you ever find yourself along US Route 6 near Mount Jewett in McKean County, be sure to visit Kinzua Bridge State Park.
Here we are at Kinzua Bridge State Park in McKean County, Pennsylvania, at the site of Kinzua Bridge. The original bridge was built in 1881 as a means of transport to the county's oil, coal, and timberlands. The original bridge was approximately 301 feet high and 2,053 feet long. However, in 1900, it was rebuilt out of steel due to issues relating to the structure of its original iron. In 1959, train traffic on the bridge was discontinued, and in 1963, it was made into a state park. In 2003, an F1 tornado struck the bridge, causing a major portion of it to collapse into the Kinzua Creek Valley below. And this can still be seen today. You can still walk along the standing part of the bridge on what is known as the Skywalk. Though this is not a particularly paranormal location, it is still an engineering marvel and an oddity on our tour of Pennsylvania. However, not terribly far from here is the site of the Kinzua Dam and the Allegheny Reservoir, which are known for their paranormal activity. Here we are at Kinzua Dam on the Allegheny Reservoir in Warren County, Pennsylvania, where there have been reports of various paranormal phenomena for decades. Construction of the reservoir began in 1960 on what was once Seneca Indian land, and the dam was officially opened in 1965. However, many of these native sites, including burial grounds, are believed to have been flooded in the process of construction, which has led some to believe that the waters here are cursed. This has been substantiated with a variety of paranormal phenomena in the area, including UFO sightings in and above the waters, 20-foot serpentine creatures sighted in the lake, car-sized catfish, Bigfoot sightings, and even hauntings in and around the waters. Will we ever be able to fully understand the cause of this paranormal activity? We may never know.
If you ever end up in the area of State College in Center County, especially if you're a Penn State fan, be sure to visit the Nittany Lion Shrine on Curtin Road.
Here we are at the Nittany Lion Shrine in State College, Pennsylvania, to discuss a mysterious big cat that has been reported all across eastern North America. It is commonly referred to as the eastern cougar or eastern puma. Though populations of cougars have been historically recognized here, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as other organizations such as the Pennsylvania Game Commission, declared these populations to be extinct in 2011. However, many have reported sightings of cougars from Canada all the way down to Florida. Are these people really seeing the last of the eastern cougars? Or are they simply witnessing the metaphorical ghosts of an extinct population? We may never know.
In the town of Phoenixville in Chester County, if you're a sci-fi nerd like me, be sure to visit the Colonial Theater, one of the more iconic film locations from an equally iconic 50s B-movie.
Here we are in front of the Colonial Theater in the town of Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, where in 1958, one of the more famous scenes from the sci-fi B-movie The Blob was filmed. Though The Blob is a work of science fiction, its story is based on a supposedly real event that happened in Philadelphia on the night of September 26, 1950. On that night, 4 Philadelphia police officers reported seeing a 6-foot-wide, dome-shaped object that emitted a purple bioluminescent glow. They described it as being able to float under its own power, and they believed that it was an alien entity. Eventually, one of the officers reached out to touch the object, which caused it to melt into a puddle onto the ground and eventually evaporate away completely. The next day, the sighting was reported to the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the creature was from then on known as the Philadelphia Purple Blob. Years later, the story inspired the 1958 science fiction B-movie, The Blob. Will we ever be able to fully understand the mystery of this strange creature? We may never know.
While you're in the Philadelphia area, there are a few locations that you should be sure to visit. On Chestnut Street, between 5th and 6th Streets, lies Independence Hall, the site of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, and the creation of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. Nearby, on Market Street, lies the Franklin Court Printing Office, which is a recreation of Benjamin Franklin's original print shop and shows the significance of the printed word during the American Revolution. Just a short walk from Independence Hall lies the museum containing the Liberty Bell, another powerful and important symbol of freedom and liberty. And just outside the Philadelphia Museum of Art is the Rocky statue, which was built to commemorate the beloved Rocky film franchise. If you ever find yourself near McCandless in Allegheny County, you can visit North Park, which happens to be home to a handful of odd locations.
Here we are at the Fountain of Youth in North Park, Pennsylvania. Since the dawn of history, man has attempted to escape its mortality and conquer death. From the search for the Holy Grail, to the ancient Greek stories of Atlantis, to Ponce de Leon's supposed expedition for the Fountain of Youth in Florida in 1514, even to the first emperor of China seeking eternal life in the Far East. Is it possible that we have found this supposed Fountain of Youth? In reality, the fountain was part of a government works program in 1939, and there has been no documented reports of eternal youth being bestowed upon a drinker of these waters. Here we are at Gravity Hill in North Park, Pennsylvania. Around the world, there are these strange locations where the gravity doesn't seem to behave properly. For example, when one leaves their car in neutral on these apparently uphill slopes, they seem to go uphill. Now, many people believe that this is associated with some sort of anomaly in the Earth's gravitational field, causing gravity to behave incorrectly, though others believe that it is merely an optical illusion caused by the landscape to make it appear as if it is uphill, when in reality it is downhill, and there is nothing wrong with the gravity. However, we have actually debunked this particular gravity hill by placing a level on the road and looking at the bubble in the level. Although it appears to the human eye that the road is in a downhill slope this way, the level showed that it is actually in a downhill slope this way. We also placed a ball on the road to see which direction it would roll, and it rolled in this direction, showing that this is the downhill slope and this is not.
In Clinton County, off Pennsylvania Route 120, lies the town of Westport, where Kettle Creek meets the west branch of the Susquehanna River.
Here we are in the small town of Westport, Pennsylvania, at the convergence point between Kettle Creek and the west branch of the Susquehanna River behind me, where for centuries there have been reports of a strange aquatic creature in these waters. It is known by many names: the Kettle Creek Monster, the West Branch Dugong, and my personal favorite, the Susquehanna Seal. The seal is described as being a large aquatic animal, somewhere between the size of an ox and a hippopotamus, and reports of it date all the way back to before European settlers in the area. Many have proposed various explanations as to the origins of this creature. Perhaps a sea lion or a small whale or some other species of that nature that got caught upstream during a flood. Others believe that it is something like a shark or even a cuttlefish, or even a prehistoric species that has evaded extinction, like a hadrosaur, an ichthyosaur, or even a labyrinthodont, an ancient amphibian. Will we ever know the true origins of the Susquehanna seal? We may never know.
About a 10-mile drive west from Westport takes you to the village of Keating, home of Clinton County's official monster.
Here we are in the village of Keating, Pennsylvania, where since the 1800s there have been reports of a strange creature lurking in the woods around the town. It is known as the Geewoggle. The Geewoggle is described as being a large 6 to 7 foot tall dog-man-like creature with bird-like talons for hands and hooves for back feet. According to legend, it was summoned by a local witch to harass her enemies, and today it is recognized as the official monster of Clinton County, Pennsylvania. Is this creature simply some undiscovered species hiding in the wilderness of Pennsylvania? Or is it the demonic spawn of some dark curse? We may never know.
About a half-hour's drive east of Altoona, in Blair County, lies the village of Oraminia, which is said to be home to a mysterious demonic entity.
Here we are on Ridge Road in the small village of Oraminia, Pennsylvania. Oraminia used to be a small mining town. However, it is now considered a ghost town and only a few people remain. One way to access the town is through a small logging road called Ridge Road. However, this is no ordinary road. It is said to be home to a mysterious supernatural being known as the Gray Spectre of Ridge Road. The specter is described as either being a human-like figure wearing a trench coat and hat, or a distorted humanoid being with long limbs and gray, scaly skin. The creature has been reported leaning against trees along the side of the road, crossing the road, and even terrorizing locals who are having too much fun around the road. Some even claim that the creature has a demonic origin. Is this story true? Is there really a supernatural darkness that haunts this road? Or is it simply a local legend? We may never know.
About 5 miles west of Altoona, in Blair County, lies world-famous Horseshoe Curve, which was completed by the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1854 to traverse the Allegheny Mountains by rail. It has since become a world-renowned tourist attraction for its unique design and engineering. Below the curve lies the Altoona Reservoir System, which are 3 interconnected reservoirs that act as Altoona's water supply. Today, they are recognized as marvels of 1800s waterworks engineering. If you ever find yourself in Bucks County along the Delaware River, you can visit Ringing Rocks County Park near the village of Upper Black Eddy, where it is said the rocks ring like bells when they're struck.
Here we are in Ringing Rocks Park in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Though this is not a particularly paranormal location, it is still a geological oddity that we had the opportunity to visit on our tour of Pennsylvania. The rocks that I am standing on now are a form of volcanic basalt, an igneous rock that was formed approximately 200 million years ago in the early Jurassic period. But the formation itself was formed from the recession of glaciers at the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago. This formation is particularly unique in the fact that when you hit one of these stones with a hammer, it produces a loud ringing sound like that of a bell. Though this sonic anomaly was produced through a combination of various mineralogical, geological, and weathering factors, no one is quite sure what precisely caused this particular phenomena. Will we ever be able to fully understand the nature of these strange rocks? We may never know.
While you're in the area, there are other interesting locations nearby, like Washington Crossing Historic Park in the town of Washington Crossing in Bucks County, where on Christmas night of 1776, General George Washington and his men crossed the icy Delaware as a sneak attack in order to confront and defeat the Hessian mercenary forces camped in Trenton, New Jersey, leading to the Battle of Trenton and one of Washington's most famous victories of the Revolution. And for music lovers, you can visit the headquarters of C.F. Martin Guitar Company, simply known as the Martin Guitar Factory in Northampton County in the town of Nazareth, where you can explore their museum and see their extensive collection of historic and famous guitars, or take a tour of the factory to see the guitar-making process. On Lake Erie's coast lies Presque Isle State Park in Erie County, which is a fascinating location in itself. As well as being known for its lakefront beaches and its unique geography, which is carved by melting glaciers during the last ice age, it is also a historically significant site.
Here we are on the shores of Lake Erie, where for centuries there have been many strange and even tragic happenings, from shipwrecks to massive algal blooms to the Battle of Lake Erie during the War of 1812. Many strange paranormal occurrences have also been reported, from UFO sightings to hauntings to even Bigfoot sightings in the woods nearby. We've come here today to discuss two creatures that supposedly reside in the lake. The first of which is referred to as the Lake Erie chomper, which is described as a fish of some variety with a large toothy mouth, and has been reported leaving strange bite marks on swimmers. Many have attributed these bite marks to a creature known as the lamprey, which is a small eel-like jawless fish that has become invasive in the Great Lakes and is known for leaving leech-like bite marks on fish and swimmers. The second and more famous is Bessie, or the Lake Erie monster, which is described as a large 30 to 40 foot long serpentine creature with grayish skin and has become known as Lake Erie's Loch Ness Monster. Is there a connection between this lake's deep history and the strange creatures that supposedly reside in, above, and around it? We may never know. Here we are on Beach 6 in Presque Isle State Park, just outside of Erie, Pennsylvania, where on July 31st, 1966, 4 teenagers reported sighting a large, square or hexagonal silvery object with bright orange and yellow lights emanating from it, fly along the beach and land in the woods nearby. They also described sighting a large 6-foot-tall, Bigfoot-like creature appear in the woods as well, going as far to say that it made scratches along the side of their car. This event would later be corroborated by many other witnesses, including others on and around this beach, as well as park officers. This event would eventually come to be known as the Presque Isle UFO incident and would gain notoriety as one of the more famous UFO incidents in the country's history. Will we ever know what this strange object was, or its correlation to this Bigfoot creature? We may never know.
While on Presque Isle, be sure to visit the Perry Monument on Crystal Point along Misery Bay, which was built to commemorate the sailors under the command of Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry during the Battle of Lake Erie in the War of 1812. Presque Isle isn't the only interesting stop in Erie. If you're the kind of person who likes to explore graveyards and creepy crypts, be sure to visit the Vampire's Crypt in Erie Cemetery on Chestnut Street.
Here we are in the Erie Cemetery in Erie, Pennsylvania, at the Vampire's Crypt. According to local legend, this vault is not the tomb of any mortal soul, but of a vampire. Many have tried to speculate on the origins of this story. Some believe that during the 1800s, a Romanian businessman moved to Erie and was buried here. Others claim that this was the site of satanic rituals in order to summon demons, which they also used to explain the mysterious burn marks on the sides of the building. Others still claim that a curse of death befalls anyone who dare enter. Are any of these claims true? We may never know.
If you ever find yourself near the town of Hyner in Clinton County, along Pennsylvania Route 120, be sure to visit Hyner View State Park, which sports one of the most breathtaking overlooks in the state.
Here we are at Hyner View State Park, just outside of, or in fact, above, Hyner, Pennsylvania. From here we can see the west branch of the Susquehanna River as it flows through the Allegheny Mountains. Though it is not a paranormal location, it certainly is a glorious one.
In Season 1, Episode 7, A Brush with the Unknown, we visited Gettysburg National Military Park in Gettysburg in Adams County. Gettysburg is an incredibly historical place, with countless fascinating locations from the war between the states, such as Pickett's Field, Devil's Den, the park's many monuments, the Pennsylvania State Memorial on Cemetery Ridge, and Little Round Top, recognizable for its rocky outcroppings.
Here we are on Little Round Top on the Gettysburg battlefield in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Here in 1863, more than 50,000 casualties were claimed at the Battle of Gettysburg. After this three-day conflict, there have been many sightings of unexplained phenomena, including ghost sightings in the area. Are these sightings true? We may never know.
In A Brush with the Unknown, we also visited the towns of Beaver Falls and New Brighton in Beaver County, where my father supposedly had brushes with the unknown. Not too far from there lies another haunted location, the village of Cannelton in Beaver County, about 3 miles west of the town of Darlington.
Here we are at Falk Cemetery, just off of Cannelton Road in the small town of Cannelton, Pennsylvania, where for centuries there have been reports of a mysterious apparition along the road and in the woods around it. She is known as the Pig Lady of Cannelton. In life, her name was Barbara Davidson. She was born in 1777 in South Carolina to Samuel and Cora McCaskey. However, they moved up to what is now Cannelton, and she spent the majority of her life here. She grew up on their family farm, tending to their pigs and other livestock. And in the town, she was renowned for her beauty, her singing ability, and her marksmanship skills. However, in the summer of 1795, her parents took a trip to Pittsburgh, leaving her home alone to tend to the farm. When they returned, Barbara was gone. After a multiple-day search in order to find her, they finally discovered her, contorted, dead, and decapitated in a crawl space underneath of their house. Her murderer and her head were never found. Since then, locals have told strange stories of Barbara's ghost haunting the roads and the woods around Cannelton in search of her head. Some have reported the ghost as having the head of a pig, and some believe that was because in search of her head, she managed to find a severed pig head, so she used it as a proxy in the meantime. Many locals have also told stories of a mysterious spectral head floating along Cannelton Road, leading some to believe that her head was discarded around there, possibly in a coal mine deep in the woods. Will we ever know who her murderer was and where her head went? We may never know.
On the other side of the state lies the Pocono Mountains. The Poconos has a history of paranormal activity and strange stories, including UFOs, hauntings, lake monsters, and Bigfoot. One such location for this paranormal activity is Austin T. Blakesley Natural Area in the town of Blakesley in Monroe County.
Here we are in Austin T. Blakesley Natural Area, just outside of the small town of Blakesley, Pennsylvania, where in 1970, a report of a strange ape-like creature came out of these very woods. It was known as the White Bigfoot of Blakesley. It was described as being a 6 to 7 foot tall Bigfoot-like creature with broad shoulders and dirty white fur. Similar sightings of white Bigfoots have been reported all across the United States, and they may shed light on the identity of Bigfoot himself. There's a genetic mutation known as albinism, which causes those who carry the mutation to have a complete lack of pigment, making them appear completely white. Examples of this include albino alligators, albino snakes, and even albino humans. And this may give credence to the idea that Bigfoot is a flesh and blood hominid species living in North America. Will we ever know the true origins of these albino Bigfoot? We may never know.
While you're in the Poconos, be sure to visit Bushkill Falls, locally nicknamed Pennsylvania's Niagara Falls, about 2 miles north of the town of Bushkill in Pike County. Another scenic location is Lackawanna State Park in Lackawanna County, about 20 minutes drive north of Scranton.
Here we are at Lackawanna State Park in the Pocono Mountains region of northeastern Pennsylvania, where since the time of the lumbermen of the 1800s, there have been reports of perhaps one of the oddest cryptids in all of U.S. history, the squonk. The squonk is often described as being an elusive, wrinkly, pig-like creature that is constantly crying due to how ugly it appears. And in order to evade predators, it is said to be able to melt into its own puddle of tears. It is said to make its home in the swampy forests of the Poconos region and is often considered the saddest cryptid in the world. Will we ever know what the squonk really was? We may never know. Here we are in Johnstown, Pennsylvania at Squonkapalooza, a festival dedicated to one of the state's most famous cryptids, the squonk. The squonk is said to be a small pig-like creature that is considered so ugly it is constantly crying. Though the creature itself is depressing, it brings joy and celebration to this town today.
That's beautiful.
Another interesting site in Johnstown is the Johnstown Inclined Plane, which is said to be the steepest inclined plane for vehicles in the world. From the top of its overlook, you can see the whole town of Johnstown below you. Also in the area is the Johnstown Flood National Memorial, about 10 miles east of Johnstown on U.S. Route 219 in Cambria County.
Here we are at the Johnstown Flood National Memorial, at the ruins of the South Fork Dam, about 14 miles outside of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The construction of this 931-foot-long, 72-foot-tall dam was completed in 1853. However, due to structural issues relating to its earthen composition, the dam was destined for disaster. On May 31st, 1889, the dam catastrophically failed, sending over 20 million tons of water toward Johnstown and completely destroying it. The flood killed over 2,200 people and was considered the most deadly flood in American history. Though this is not a necessarily paranormal site, it certainly is a tragic one. In the festival special, we also visited the town of Marionville in Forest County, where the Forest County Bigfoot Festival was taking place. Here we are in the gateway of the Allegheny National Forest in the small town of Marionville, Pennsylvania, where from June 9th to 11th of 2023, they are hosting the Forest County Bigfoot Festival. In Fayette County, only a couple miles from the West Virginia border, lies Point Marion, home to its very own river monster. Here we are in the small town of Point Marion, Pennsylvania, at the confluence of the Monongahela and the Cheat rivers, where for centuries there have been reports of a strange creature in these waters. In West Virginia, it is known as the Cheat River Monster, but here it is known as the Monster of Seltzer's Hole. Reports of this creature date all the way back to 1893, where farmers in the area reported a large dragon-like animal crawling from a region of the river known as Seltzer's Hole in order to steal and eat livestock. Eyewitnesses described the creature as being a large reptilian animal with a long, slender body, short limbs, a crocodilian tail, and a dragon-like head. It was also described as having appendages behind its shoulders that were somewhere between fins, wings, and claws. Though sightings of the creature continue on and off to this day, many believe that the original story was simply a hoax. Was this story true? We may never know. In Erie County, on Route 19, about 11 miles northeast of Edinburgh, lies the town of Waterford, which is home to a terrifying, bloodthirsty beast. Here we are in the town of Waterford, Pennsylvania, where during the 1970s, reports of a strange, terrifying creature arose from this town. It was known as the Waterford Sheep Man. Eyewitnesses reported a large, 7-foot-tall humanoid creature with the head and fur of a sheep, large horns protruding from its skull, and an insatiable thirst for blood. According to local legend, it would attack and dismember unwitting animals and even humans before consuming their viscera and blood. It was said to make its home along Baghdad Road, which we are standing near, and often frequented a covered bridge on the other side of town. It was said to hide in the rafters of this bridge, awaiting unsuspecting drivers to appear below it, before it would jump into their cars and attack them brutally in an attempt to murder and eat them. Though sightings of the creature continued throughout the 1970s, they completely stopped by the close of the decade. Why was this monster so bloodthirsty? Where did it go? And might it return again to this small town to rain terror upon it once more. We may never know.
One of the more interesting regions of Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania Wilds, which comprises most of north-central Pennsylvania and has a plethora of fascinating sights. There's the Austin Dam outside the town of Austin in Potter County, just off of Pennsylvania Route 872, which was built in 1909 and was the largest dam of its kind in the state at the time, but catastrophically failed in 1911, destroying many settlements in the Freeman Run Valley below the dam. Today, you can still see and explore its ruins. Also in Potter County, about a 15-minute drive east from Coudersport, is the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum, where you can see their extensive collection of artifacts, locomotives, tools, and other paraphernalia associated with the Pennsylvania lumber industry of the 18 and 1900s. A few miles north of Emporium in McKean County lies the small village of Gardoux, which is said to be home to a hidden pirate's booty.
Here we are in the small village of Gardoux in McKean County, Pennsylvania, where local legend tells that a pirate's treasure supposedly lies in this tomb. The story begins with a Captain David Thomas, a notorious pirate from the early 1800s, who supposedly sank a Spanish man-o-war off the coast of Florida in order to steal its wealth of silver bullion. Though he lost his own ship in the process, he was able to make his way up the coast until he reached the Susquehanna River. After he had traversed the river, he settled at the site of Great Elk Lick, which is now known as Gardoux. There he spent the rest of his days living in a log cabin and selling salts to the locals. After Thomas's death, a family from New York known as the Parker family, and in particular a man named Colonel Noah Parker, arrived in the area. One story tells that in Colonel Parker's search for oil, he discovered a spring which, according to local Seneca legend, contained waters which had medicinal healing properties. With this in mind, he opened a sanitarium and a bottling plant so that those who wished to be healed by these waters could come and do so. However, the sanitarium was eventually burned down and destroyed. At some point in his life, Parker supposedly attained the diary of Captain Thomas, and with it, the whereabouts of his hidden treasure. Though before his death, he claimed that the treasure was hidden somewhere along the Manatee River in Florida. Others believed that he had stolen a piece of the treasure for himself and hid it with him in his tomb after his death. Though the tomb itself says 1895, this was actually when the tomb was completed, and Parker died in 1897, spending the last 2 years of his life using his life savings to build the mausoleum and a very special coffin for himself. Since that time, a legend has arose around Parker and his connection with pirates. Some claim that it was not Captain Thomas's diary, but Blackbeard's or Captain Kidd's. And some even believe that the ghost of Colonel Parker still resides around his tomb, haunting the road and protecting his secret treasure. Are any of these stories true? Is there really a pirate's booty hidden in this small Pennsylvania town? We may never know.
Outside of Cinnamahoning, in the village of Wyside in Cameron County, at the confluence of Cinnamahoning Creek and Wyckoff Run, lies a large rock locally known as Ring Rock. This rock was used as a docking spot for log rafts being sent downstream during the county's lumber era, and it still remains to this day. Outside the village of Hicks Run in Cameron County lies the Hicks Run Wildlife Viewing Area, where you can catch a glimpse of many examples of the county's wildlife, ranging from songbirds, rabbits, and turkey to the elusive white-tailed deer and the PA Wild's famous elk herd. Another scenic vista is the Bucktail Overlook in Elk State Forest in Cameron County, locally known as the Top of the World. From here, you can see the forests where Fred Wood's Trail resides. In Season 1, Episode 1, Bigfoot, The Legend of the Squatch, we explored Fred Wood's Trail for evidence of the elusive Sasquatch.
Hello. I would think that this was a good place for a Bigfoot to live because there's a lot of places to hide around here, and there are also a lot of, it's much cooler down here, and there's no sounds bothering a Bigfoot. So I think this would be a pretty good place for me to camp out for the moment.
From the Bucktail Overlook, you can also see the town of Driftwood. In the middle of Driftwood stands the Bucktail Monument, which was built to honor the Bucktail Regiment, who were militiamen from Cameron County and other counties of the Northern Tier that, by raft, traveled south to fight alongside the Union during the war between the states, and were part of many of its battles, including the Battle of Gettysburg. In Season 1, Episode 6, The Birds of Thunder, we went to Dents Run off Route 555 in Elk County to investigate a thunderbird sighting from the 1800s.
Here we are in Dents Run, where in 1892, a man named Fred Murray supposedly saw a flock of thunderbirds, which he said were like giant buzzards with a 16-foot wingspan.
We also explored a wetland area off of Route 555 in Cameron County, locally known as the Lily Pads, that is supposedly home to a mysterious phantom known only to a few from the area.
Here we are off Route 555 in Cameron County, Pennsylvania, at a place locally known as the Lily Pads. I'm here with my dad, who grew up in the area and has been told many strange tales of this place. Would you like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, I was told a story by my stepfather, Bill Graham, and also a local historian. His name was Ira Collins. And he spoke about a train trestle that used to run through here. And the train tracks are no longer there, but there's a road that's posted. We weren't able to walk down there. But the train used to come through here, past these lily pads, and at one point in time back in history, whenever that was, the train either derailed or it crashed, and the train fell into the lily pads, and it sucked down into the muck. At least this is the story that I was told. And apparently there was a train engineer that had died in that accident. And for many, many years, people would articulate that they would be coming through here at night when there was a low-level fog, and from out of the mist, they would see a train engineer walking with his lantern. So this was always a haunted place as a kid, and every time we would drive through here, we would always keep an eye out for the train engineer. But I don't know if they ever actually did any checking to see if there's a locomotive down in the lily pads in the swamp there. But I can tell you, many people have said that they've seen that train engineer on a late night walking down the road with his lantern.
Fascinating.
That's good, we can cut right there.
Down the road from Driftwood sits the village of Cinnamahoning, where every year a festival is held called the Cinnamahoning Rattlesnake Hunt. During this festival, snake wranglers, mainly members of the Cinnamahoning Sportsmen's Association, display, handle, and do catch and release programs relating to the local snakes, mainly eastern timber rattlers and copperheads. Other local groups, bands, and businesses also have vendors there, and it has become a tourist attraction for the entire region. Another interesting place to visit is the Little Museum in Sterling Run, a few miles north of Driftwood in Cameron County. The museum was originally the schoolhouse for the town, but now is a small museum where you can look around and see artifacts and items from throughout the county's history. And only a few miles north from the Little Museum, about 3 miles south of Emporium, lies the Wayside Memorial, locally known as Memorial Springs, a roadside picnic area and spring that was built to honor the 7 CCC workers and 1 Forest Service leader who lost their lives in the Pepper Hill Fire of 1938. Today, it is a refreshing pit stop on our tour of Pennsylvania.
The water is cool, the water is clean. Now that is what I call some high quality H2O.
In Clinton County, there is a rock formation called Altar Rock or Chimney Rock. According to local legend, in the days of the Indians, it was used as an altar to pray and sacrifice. However, turmoil arose around the rock when French fur trappers made encampment at what is now Round Island in the west branch of the Susquehanna below. A local medicine man named Two Pines told prophecies of tragedy that would befall his people if they let the whites remain there, though most of his tribesmen saw only the trade opportunities instead. After long enough, quarrels between the French and Two Pines arose, leading to the death of people in both groups and the eventual death of Two Pines on Altar Rock. The Frenchmen left the area soon after, but no one knows if they survived afterward or if they were killed off by the Indians. In subsequent centuries, 2 magnificent white pines grew atop the rock, standing defiantly as Two Pines did, even though there was little to no soil to sustain these trees. Today, the trees are long dead, but decades ago, Someone at some point decided to put a cutout of an Indian on the rock, and it is now a local tourist destination. The Indian can still be seen there from Route 120 below. If you ever end up in the town of Butler in Butler County, you can visit the Butler County Courthouse, a symbol of the town and the county's history and mysteries.
Here we are in front of the Butler County Courthouse in Butler, Pennsylvania. This building is an excellent example of Victorian-style architecture, which was in part inspired by the Gothic revival of the 1800s. Gothic-style architecture is well known for its gargoyles, small, grotesque, animalistic statues that would adorn buildings in order to scare off evil spirits. However, from June of 1993 to March of 2011, Butler County was visited by its own flying creature, the Butler Gargoyle. Eyewitnesses described the creature as being a 7 to 8 foot tall humanoid figure with pale grayish skin, a bicycle helmet-like skull, and large bat-like wings. It was sighted roaming roadsides and farm fields throughout Butler County, particularly around the towns of Chicora and East Brady. Based on its description and behavior, some have equated the story to the Mothman of Point Pleasant in 1966 and 67. Is there a possible connection between these two creatures? We may never know.
On the corner of Pittsburgh Street and Grand Avenue in the town of Mars in Butler County, there is evidence to show that this town truly is out of this world.
Pennsylvania is a handful of small towns with astronomical or even mythologically themed names, such as Venus in Venango County, Apollo in Armstrong County, and where we are now, Mars in Butler County. Here stands the Mars Flying Saucer, proof that this town has really taken its name to heart. Though there was never actually any UFO or paranormal activity reported here, we still thought it would be a fun addition to our grand tour of Pennsylvania.
In Ohiopyle State Park, just outside the town of Ohiopyle in Fayette County, lies scenic Cucumber Falls, a 30-foot high waterfall on Cucumber Run and a local favorite for hikers. While you're in the Ohiopyle area, especially if you're interested in art and architecture, be sure to visit world-famous Falling Water near the town of Mill Run in Fayette County, just a few miles north of the park.
Here we are at Falling Water in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. This building was designed in 1935 by architect Frank Lloyd Wright as a vacation home for the Kaufman family, owners of Kaufman's department store in Pittsburgh. One of the most famous aspects of its design is that it was built over top of a waterfall on the Bear Run River, giving it its name. Since its creation, it has become world-renowned for its unique architecture and has even become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Though it is not a paranormal location, it is certainly a fascinating piece of modern architecture.
A fascinating historical site in the area is Fort Necessity National Battlefield in Fayette County. The first important site here is Jumonville Glen outside the town of Jumonville, where on May 28, 1754, British troops from Virginia led by Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, along with a small group of Mingo warriors led by Chieftain Tanacharison, ambushed a group of French troops under the command of Joseph Colon du Jumonville. This event would become known as the Battle of Jumonville Glen, and was the opening battle of the French and Indian War. Jumonville himself was killed during the battle, though the exact details of how and by whom became and remain a historical controversy. In subsequent years, there have also been reports of ghostly apparitions and Bigfoot on the Glen. Are they connected to the site's bloody history? We may never know. Also in the park is the grave of British General Edward Braddock, whom Washington served under in 1755 and was killed during a surprise attack by the French and Indians on July 5th. After the battle at Jumonville Glen, Washington and his troops retreated to Fort Necessity, about 8 miles away to the southeast. There, on July 3rd, 1754, French and Indian forces under Louis Coulon du Villiers attacked the fort in the Battle of Fort Necessity, which ended in Washington's surrender. During the surrender, Washington signed a document which stated that he had assassinated Jumonville, though he did not speak French himself, and it was possible that his translator, Tanacharison, mistranslated on purpose. Washington later stated that if he had known that was what he was agreeing to, he would not have signed it. But no matter the case, Washington's supposed confession of assassination was used to justify and fuel much of the French and Indian War from then on. Also in the park is the Mount Washington Tavern, which was built in the 1830s by Judge Nathaniel Ewing of nearby Uniontown, and was one of the many rest stops along the National Road, one of the first major highways in the country, which went from Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois. In Season 1, Episode 6, The Birds of Thunder, we visited a Thunderbird hotspot, the city of Greensburg in Westmoreland County.
Here we are in the town of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, where over the years there have been many reported sightings of the Thunderbird. While you're in the area, you can visit the Bushy Run battlefield outside the town of Jeannette in Westmoreland County, where the Battle of Bushy Run took place in 1763, a battle of Pontiac's Rebellion, which was one of the many conflicts between the native tribes and British colonial forces that occurred after the French and Indian War. It is also our family's favorite kite flying spot. In Season 1, Episode 13, the Christmas Special, we visited the Monroeville Mall in Monroeville in Allegheny County to visit the 2023 Krampus Fest. Here we are at the Krampus Holiday Marketplace in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, where we have gathered to celebrate the Krampus legend. While in Monroeville, stop in at Car Hop Sub Shop on William Penn Highway, where you can grab a bite to eat and experience their automotive motif. Another interesting legend in the area comes from the Beaver Run Reservoir in Westmoreland County. Here we are just off of Pennsylvania Route 380 on the northern shore of Beaver Run Reservoir in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, where in 2011, reports of a mysterious reptile arose from these waters. The creature was known as the Beaver Run alligator. Municipal Authority of Westmoreland County workers reported a 5-foot-long alligator swimming in the reservoir, and many believe that the creature ended up here because someone had it as a pet and it became too large to handle, so they released it into the lake. At least at this point in time, there was no attempt to capture the creature, as it was believed it would naturally die in the cold weather of the oncoming winter. However, it was an unusually warm winter that year, and there was a good chance the creature survived. The following year, the Pittsburgh Zoo became involved, and it attempted to capture the alligator and send it to Florida, with no success. However, this was not the last time the area had run-ins with alligators. In 2023, 2 alligators were sighted and eventually caught out of the Kiskiminitis River about 2.5 miles north from here. Though there were 2 people accused of releasing the alligators into the river, it is oddly coincidental how close these 2 encounters were. Is there a connection? We may never know.
A local favorite of mine is Glenn's Homemade Custard, located in the town of Springdale in Allegheny County, where you can sit and enjoy some of their delicious frozen custard. There is also another Glenn's in Lower Borough in Westmoreland County. One of the weirder destinations in Pennsylvania is up in Crawford County. It is known as the Linesville Spillway, or simply the Spillway, and it is located in Pymatuning State Park, about a mile or so south from the town of Linesville on Hartstown Road.
Here we are at the Linesville Spillway in Pymatuning State Park in Crawford County, Pennsylvania. The Pymatuning Reservoir, which we see around us, was originally the Great Pymatuning Swamp and was created through glaciation during the last ice age. However, in 1931, the reservoir was created in order to mitigate floodwater flow into the Shenango and Beaver rivers. Part of this construction was the Linesville Spillway, which we see below. The spillway was meant to manage the flow of water through the reservoir. However, it has since become home to these carp. Though the carp themselves are an invasive species in this area, they were introduced here before the reservoir was created for fishing purposes, and obviously have made it their home. Today, due to the absurd number of fish here, the spillway has become known as the place where ducks walk on the fish's backs, and has become a renowned tourist destination in the area. Tourists can come and feed the carp. Usually they feed them fish pellets and bread that are sold nearby. However, they've been known to feed them as strange of things as birthday cakes, stale donuts, and even fried chicken. However, this is usually frowned upon by the park, as that is an environmental concern. Though this is not a particularly paranormal location, it is still a fascinating curiosity and a personal favorite of mine on our tour of Pennsylvania.
One of the most historical cities in the state, with countless sights, stories, and interesting pit stops, is the Steel City of Pittsburgh. In Season 1, Episode 7, A Brush with the Unknown, we discussed the city's ghostly side from the stunning vista of Mount Washington on the south side. On the North Shore is the Carnegie Science Center, which is home to an impressive collection of scientific, astronomical, and engineering wonders. Also on the north side lies PNC Park, Pittsburgh's famous baseball field and home of the Pittsburgh Pirates. One of the most iconic landmarks in Pittsburgh is the Point, the great fountain that stands at the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers.
Here we are at the Point in Point State Park in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers converge to form the Ohio River. The point, as well as Pittsburgh as a whole, has a deep, rich history, spanning from being the epicenter of the French and Indian War, when Fort Duquesne and the later Fort Pitt stood not too far from here, to being the launching point for Lewis and Clark's expedition into the West, to being the center of America's steel and coal industries, to even being the original headquarters for Heinz ketchup. Pittsburgh also has a variety of paranormal activity associated with it, which may be caused by the convergence of waterways attracting various spirits and energies, as well as its deep history. One such legend is that of Monongahela, a half-man, half-fish creature said to reside in the Monongahela River of West Virginia and Pennsylvania. In around 2010, a swim race known as the Search for Monongahela was started right here in Pittsburgh. And though some say that the legend was completely made up for this purpose, others state that the story goes all the way back to the French and Indian War, claiming that British soldiers supposedly fought strange creatures from the river. Will the mystery of this strange creature ever be discovered, or the mysteries of any of the other paranormal happenings that have occurred in this great city? We may never know.
If you're on the South Shore, be sure to take a ride on the Duquesne Incline, which takes those who ride it up the side of Mount Washington. It is an icon of Pittsburgh. In the famous Strip District, you can visit the Senator John Heinz History Center, considered by the Smithsonian to be one of the greatest history museums in the country. It is a comprehensive collection of artifacts and items from throughout Pittsburgh's history. And if yins are looking for a bite to eat, be sure to visit city-famous Permanis and have one of their famous sandwiches. In Oakland, there are a handful of interesting sights. There is the Millennium Panther statue. There is the Cathedral of Learning, also part of the Pitt campus, which is said to be home to a handful of ghostly apparitions and paranormal activity. The Carnegie Art and Natural History Museums, which have vast collections of artwork, specimens, and artifacts, as well as the iconic statue of the museum's mascot, Dippy the Diplodocus. And in Highland Park is the Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium, with its wonderful collection of various familiar and exotic animals. One of the events they often do is the Asian Lantern Festival, and in Season 1, Episode 8, Here Be Dragons, we took a quick peek at this due to one of their displays.
Pittsburgh Zoo and PBG Aquarium, where they are celebrating the Asian Lantern Festival. One of the models they have is the Chinese dragon, which in Chinese mythology is renowned for being an elemental being.
One of the most famous paranormal regions in Pennsylvania is the Chestnut Ridge, a mountain range on the western edge of the Appalachians that goes through southwestern Pennsylvania.
Here we are in the Chestnut Ridge Mountains, a series of mountains that runs off of the Appalachians from Indiana, Pennsylvania, all the way down to Morgantown, West Virginia. From Native American times all the way up to the present day, the Chestnut Ridge has had a rich history of mysterious phenomena. Sightings of Bigfoot-like creatures and unidentified flying objects are common in this area, as well as sightings of thunderbirds, dogmen, and ghostly apparitions. Places along the ridge have become well known for their mysterious occurrences, and some even believe that the mountains themselves hold some supernatural power that attracts these entities. Will we ever be able to fully understand the forces and the monsters that roam the hoots and hollows of this strange range? We may never know.
One of the most iconic places along the ridge is the small town of Kecksburg in Westmoreland County. This may be our most visited location, as we visited the town in Season 1, Episode 4, Are We Alone?, Season 1, Episode 11, The Festival Special, and Season 2, Episode 3, The Return of the Mothman.
Here we are in the small village of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, about 40 minutes away from Pittsburgh. I'm here to talk to you about an extraterrestrial occurrence that happened here December 9th, 1965. On that night, a large fireball was reported to shoot through the sky and crashed in the woods just around us. It was reported to look like a giant acorn with language encrypted at the bottom, like this right here. This model was made in honor of that UFO.
While in the area, you can also visit Living Treasures Animal Park, a small zoo just off of Pennsylvania Route 711 near the town of Donegal in Westmoreland County, where you can see the animals and stay the night in one of their vacation rental cabins. There is also another Living Treasures in Newcastle in Lawrence County, though it is not on the ridge. One quaint town along the ridge is the town of Ligonier, just off of the Lincoln Highway in Westmoreland County. It is home to Fort Ligonier, which has a deep history going back to the French and Indian War, as well as being an important outpost for Western expansion for the colonial British and early American settlers. It also has a uniquely quaint town square known as the Diamond, which is surrounded by dozens of small shops. While we were in Ligonier, we had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Pennsylvania's foremost paranormal researcher, Stan Gordon.
How did you first get involved in the cryptid research thing?
I started this when I was 10 years old in 1959. And I happened to hear a radio show, it was probably around Halloween time during that period, and they were talking about strange happenings, talking about haunted houses, flying saucers, strange creatures, and I was a curious 10-year-old and I wanted to know if these stories were true. So I went to the Greensburg Library and started reading all the books they had on the subject, began to cut articles out of the newspaper, made scrapbooks. And then I was 16 years old in 1965 when the incident happened near Kecksburg, PA. And I've been out in the field ever since.
You've investigated all over the place. What are some of the more common types of sightings that you've investigated?
I get reports from throughout the state of Pennsylvania, and I've investigated hundreds of Bigfoot sightings, multitudes of cryptid reports. So there have been all kinds of reports over the years, from Thunderbird sightings, including very recently. There have been, of course, out-of-place sounds like Black Panther sightings. And then there's some of the stranger reports, like the Butler Gargoyle. So it's kind of like these winged humanoid reports. Some people relate them to Mothman, even though there's some differences in these reports. We've had all kinds of things reported for years, strange things. Different type of floating humanoid creatures have been reported. Things in the rivers and lakes of Pennsylvania have been reported for years. So there's a lot of things out there people don't know about. I go into a great deal about these cases in my newer book, Creepy Cryptids, and we get into some very, very strange cases that happened, some even more recent years.
What would you say the strangest report that you've investigated was?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've been involved with hundreds of cases over going on 65 years of research now, and I've never personally seen a Bigfoot or UFO myself. I've interviewed thousands of UFO witnesses and hundreds of cryptid witnesses who have seen a lot of strange things out there. I would have to say probably the one that always sticks in my mind is that major incident happened during that massive outbreak of UFO and Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania in 1973. But it's quite a long story. It does it briefly. It was October 25th, 1973. That's when I had my research groups. I had scientists, engineers, police officers, former military specialists. We all did it voluntarily around our full-time jobs to investigate cases. And I had it set up by 1970 to investigate cases throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And then we had this massive UFO outbreak that started first in 1973, all year long, with hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings. Many of them were low-level, large structured objects, not just lights in the sky. And then in the summer of '73, we had the biggest Bigfoot outbreak ever documented. That went on for months and months. Many of the sightings were in daylight, sometimes more than one creature seen together. In a lot of cases, my teams would be out there within minutes, hours after they occurred, and there would be physical evidence, especially lots of footprints showing up, even in snow, which was very interesting. And I had some very skeptical scientific people in my research group that spent a lot of time out in the field with me, and they began to realize something unusual was going on. They interview the witnesses, they see the emotional response, they see animal reactions, they see the physical evidence, and they see the patterns, and they began to realize something very, very strange is going on now. And that was just one of multitudes of incidents that began to occur over the months ahead.
A lot of these things are occurring along the Chestnut Ridge, and the Chestnut Ridge is known for its paranormal activity. Do you have any theories as to why that area is more hot than others, and what that may mean for the sightings?
I've been looking at it for years and years, and I can't find anything that's really drawn to that area. Here's the pattern I found many, many years ago. Many close-range, low-level UFO sightings and many encounters with Bigfoot and other cryptids often occur in the vicinity of high-energy sources. So a lot of incidents around high-tension power lines, power plants, gas wells, gas lines, radio towers, cell phone towers, communication towers, bodies of water, railroad tracks, etc. Definitely energy connection. But yes, we do get a lot of reports in the Chestnut Ridge and going into the Laurel Ridge, but there are many, many reports come in from areas away from the ridges as well. And in more recent years, we're getting more reports in more populated areas. So the suburbs of Pittsburgh. We've heard for years around Philadelphia and Harrisburg. So a lot of this is going on in many other areas where there's not a lot of woods around. And even Bigfoot sightings are occurring more and more in areas where there's not a lot of woods around.
Do you have any idea why there's more of them occurring?
Every year we're getting reports now that are really detailed, many at close range, that you could not easily dismiss. And you know, I've heard reports out there that, well, a lot of people are seeing bear. Well, I can tell you, especially in this area, a lot of these people live with bear who are reporting these. They know what they look like, okay? And I mean, I can tell you incidents just in the last few years. For example, up in the, close to the Indiana, Westmoreland County border, early one morning, woman is coming out early on her property. This 8 to 9 foot tall, huge kind of gray-haired Bigfoot comes up out of the woods carrying a deer over its shoulder. It stopped and looked at her. She was probably 50, 60 feet away from it, made a loud grunt and ran off in the woods with a deer and took off. The smaller ones are being reported too, like 4 to 5 feet tall. We've had reports for years. Most reports in Pennsylvania are around 7 to 9 feet tall, other reports we're getting. And we're getting reports year after year. Last few years, some very interesting reports are coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. And if people are interested, again, they can reach me by phone at 724-838-7768. Website, again, is stangordon.info. And the email address is on it. They can contact me, and people can contact me confidentially. Many people call in about reporting these type of things.
On the northern end of the Chestnut Ridge, in Indiana County, lies the town of Indiana, which has a handful of historical sites. You can visit the Jimmy Stewart Museum, which houses a collection of paraphernalia related to Indiana's own Jimmy Stewart. And right next to the museum stands the Indiana County War Memorial, which honors those from the county who had made the ultimate sacrifice to defend their country. And to wrap up our journey, about a 40-minute drive north from Indiana in Jefferson County, come and visit the town of Punxsutawney, the home of perhaps the most iconic of all of Pennsylvania's legendary creatures.
Here we are in the town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, to discuss Pennsylvania's most famous fantastical character. The seer of seers, the sage of sages, the prognosticator of prognosticators, and weather prophet extraordinaire, the one and only Punxsutawney Phil. According to tradition, Phil uses his shadow to predict the weather. If he sees his shadow, this means that there will be 6 more weeks of winter-like weather, and if he does not, it means an early spring. The actual ceremony is carried out at a location known as Gobbler's Knob. However, for the rest of the year, he lives here with his wife Phyllis and his 2 children. According to lore, the Phil we see now has always been the same Phil, all the way back to 1886, and the rest of them are considered imposters. This has been maintained through an elixir of life, referred to as groundhog punch, which he apparently drinks every year at a festival in the autumn. Though the tradition of Punxsutawney Phil is taken very seriously, the lore is meant to be lighthearted and simply a fantastical tale to go along with a beloved rodent. Will we ever be able to fully understand the mysteries behind Phil and his magical ways? We may never know.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the grand tour of the cryptids, creatures, and curiosities of the Keystone State just as much as my family and I have while making it. Cryptid Creatures is brought to you by the Kitty Petters Union, Cobble Sound Recording Company, and my dad's show, Meet the Pressers. For previous and future episodes, be sure to visit the Cryptid Creatures YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends. This is Cryptid Creatures with Augie Macro, signing off.